Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our latest Southern California housing market update. My name is Oscar Wei. I'm a senior economist and the director of research at the California Association of Realtors. It's a pleasure to be here to share some information with you about the Southern California housing market. Um, you probably wondering, usually, the our W chief economist Jordan Levine is the one who put together the update. So what am I doing here? Well, he's on vacation right now, so I'm stepping in. Hopefully, I can provide a similar um, type of information to you, and hopefully, I live up to his expectation, to your expectation. So let's get started. Before we get into the housing market and also the economy, I want to give you some update on the coronavirus because it does have a significant impact on the economy as well as the housing market. As many of you know, in the last couple of weeks or so, we have been seeing a little bit of an uptick in terms of number of cases in the coronavirus infections. So let's take a quick look at what we are seeing right now. In the last couple of weeks, number of cases actually increased. Number of positive cases had now surpassed 220,000 in California. And in the last few weeks, in the last couple of days, we have been seeing thousands of cases. In fact, at the end of June, we're seeing 6,000 cases on a daily basis. That's pretty significant. Now, of course, part of the reason why we're seeing new cases is because we have more new testings. We have more testings in California and some of the other states, but that doesn't explain all the surge in infections. In fact, if you take a look at number of people who have been hospitalized in the last few weeks or last couple of weeks, that number also has increased significantly. Take a look at the slide on the left-hand side. It surged quite significantly as compared to the trend that we have seen in the past. So the number of patients being hospitalized may not necessarily hinge on new testings. So what is the reason behind it? Well, we had the reopening of many states, including California, in mid-May, and that actually has increased the number of interactions between people, and we might have relaxed, at an aggregated level, we might have relaxed um, our concern about the coronavirus pandemic a little bit when we started reopening, and as such, there might be a little bit more infections. There might be a little bit more people get infected. The positivity rate, which is another measure that you can take a look at, that is the number of people, percent of people who got infected, who has been tested positive, increased from 4.4% a few weeks ago to 5.6%. So, we have to make sure that we continue to practice social distancing in order to, to keep this pandemic situation down. Because otherwise, we might have to close the economy again, have another lockdown again, and that could affect the economy as well as the housing market. Of course, the coronavirus situation is not only affecting the public health, but also the economy. Some of you have been paying attention to the economic outlook, and you notice in the first quarter of the year in 2020, we had a decline in economic output. In fact, it's the largest decline that we have seen since 2008, 2009. And that's because of the shutdown. In the mid of March, we shut down the economy, shut down the state, and from that point on, we lost a lot of activities. But even with only a 2-week shutdown, the economy has already gone down by 5%, on GDP. That's how significant it is. In the next couple months or so, in April, it actually dropped even more. If you take a look at, when you look at economic output has a lot to do with retail sales. In fact, retail sales is a big part of consumer spending, which makes up about 2/3 of the economic output. So when retail sales goes down, the economic output will go down as well. So take a look at what happened in March and in April. March dropped 8.2% compared to the previous month, and April dropped close to 15%. Well, we did have a bounce back when the economy reopened, when the state reopened in May, bounced back by 17, 18%. But even with that bounce back though, compared to last year, May's number is still down by 6.1% or so. So it's probably safe to say in the second quarter, After dropping 5% in the first quarter, in the second quarter will probably continue to drop. Many economists believe that it's going to drop by about 30 to 40%, and I believe that is going to be the case as well. And that's because the labor market is not looking it's still pretty bad. Despite the fact that we actually had an improvement in the number that got released earlier today. Unemployment rate remained at a high level with double digit, but it dropped actually to 11.1%. The month before that, in May, it was 13%, a little bit over 13%, and then before that was close to 15%. So we have been improving, and the improvement is because of increase in job growth in the last couple months. We had an increase of 4.8 or close to 5 million jobs in June, and then prior to that, we had a 2.7 million increase in jobs. Together we increased by about 7.5 million. That's great news, right? But keep that in mind. In April, we actually dropped because of the shutdown. We lost about 20 million jobs. So even if we have an improvement of 7.5 million in the last couple months, we're still behind last year by about 15 million. That's quite significant. 15 million job loss. When you put that into perspective in terms of unemployment, you remember, at the beginning of the year, we had about 3.5% unemployment rate. Right now, it's 11.1%. Now, the question is whether that is going to continue. The increase in the job growth, whether that is going to the improvement in job growth, whether that is going to continue. It's really hard to say, and I have a feeling that it probably will not be as robust as what we saw in the last couple months. And the reason is, in the last, as I mentioned, the last couple of weeks, we have some resurgence in coronavirus. That is probably going to slow down the economy a little bit as people scale back on their activity. So it's going to be interesting to see, how we will continue to progress on the labor market. Now, if you look at the weekly number, it's improving also, but it's also showing that it's leveling off, and that's why I think in the next couple months or so, it may not be as improving as much. If you look at the number of people who file unemployment claims, these are the jobless claims. Now, it peaked in end of March when we had to shut down. It peaked all the way to 7 million, and it continued to decline. In fact, it continued to decline for 13 consecutive weeks. But then it kind of gets stuck a little bit. In the last few weeks, it stayed at around 1.5. And it still remained on a declining trend, but it didn't really drop that much in the latest number. And the people who continue to apply for unemployment benefits stay at a high number at close to 20 million. Just to put things into perspective, we have in the labor market 165 people who are employed. With 20 million people getting unemployment, that means we have about 13% of people who are who will be unemployed and considered unemployment. So the unemployment rate is about 13%, which is similar to what we have talked about earlier. What about California? If you look at California, it is still very, very high compared to what we saw earlier this year. About 44,000 people applied for unemployment benefit. As of last week, we had about 280,000. That's about 6 or 7 times higher than what we normally have. With the economy, with the labor market improving a little bit, and some improvement in the financial market in early June and May, it seems like consumers are feeling a little bit more confident. But again, that number may not actually continue to rise. If the resurgence of coronavirus turn out to continue in the next couple of weeks, and also we started seeing a little bit of fluctuation in the financial market. So the consumer confidence may actually stay at around this level for in the upcoming months. What about the market? Now, you probably have heard it, and you probably have seen it in some of our slides before, or presentation before that. The housing market, even though we have been seeing it dipped, in March and April, and also in May. This is a slide in May. the outlook actually could be a little bit better in the upcoming months. And I'll show you some more positive news with our weekly numbers. But first, let's take a look at the monthly statistics. If you look at the monthly statistics, the statewide home sales, yes, it went down. It went down actually by 40%, which is the biggest that we have seen for quite some time. In fact, going back to 2007. Now, if we look at when we accounted for the March, April, and May number, the decline, for the year, for the first 5 months of the year, it dropped about 13%. Price-wise, it dropped about 4%, with supply remaining at 4.3 months, which is considered still tight, and the number of days on market remain at 17 days, and the sales price to list price ratio is pretty much flat. Let's hone in a little bit. With the drop in sales, closed sales, which is, now keep in mind, closed sales is a reflection of what happened about a month ago. It's sort of a real mirror indicator. It reflects what happened. It reflects interest of buying home in April that opened escrow and closed in May. So what happened with the more real-time, housing demand situation? If we need to look at that, we should take a look at pending sales. Pending sales show a little bit more optimism or more positive sign. Now, pending sales that happened in May will close in June. So this is an indication of what we're going to see in June. In fact, if you take a look at what happened in pending sales compared to last month, it surged by 67, 68%. That has, of course, is partly due to the fact that we have the reopening in California, but also people are feeling a little bit more encouraged because of the fact that interest rates remain at a very, very low level. But also, some of the pent-up demand that were built up in April, May, when we have the reopening, people started, engaging in market activity again. But, another thing to be aware of is many of the realtors figured out how to do virtual transactions. They learn how to do virtual tours and things like that. So, they know that it's going to take some time for the market to get back to, the previous normal. So they have to adapt to the new way of doing things. And as such, they learn how to conduct, activities virtually. If pending sales, in fact, surged by about 67% or it turned into closed sales, and in fact, closed sales increase at that level, then we're going to see pending sales still decline from last year, on a year-over-year basis, but only by about 5.5% as compared to this month, closed sales down by about 43%. So we're seeing some improvement, definitely seeing some improvement. What about Southern California? After all, this is about Southern California housing market update, right? So let's talk about Southern California. If you look at Southern California as a whole, we also following a very similar trend. In fact, the drop in closed sales actually dipped a little bit more significantly by close to 46% as compared to the state as a whole at 41%. Individual county-wise, look at closed sales. If you look at LA, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, San Diego, and Ventura, now these are, let me remind you, the number that you're looking at here, these are weekly numbers. Instead of using the monthly statistics that we got from the monthly May monthly number, I decided to move forward a little bit and look at some of the more recent statistics on a weekly basis. So the weekly number that we have here is actually for the month of June. In fact, I actually have the legend wrong here, but this last number is the week of June. If you look at June's number, the last week of June, it actually dipped a little bit compared to the previous week. So we did see a closed sales actually surged to a highest level in the last few weeks, and then the latest week in LA actually dipped a little bit. So this suggests that yes, we are going to see June's number closing in, for Southern California at a pretty decent number, probably dropped, compared to last year by about 5 or 6%. But then in July, we're seeing a little bit of the leveling off. Now, whether this leveling off in LA, for example, is going to continue, that's really hard to say. Now, it could be because of um, the resurgence in coronavirus that lead to a slowdown in the market. It could also be because of lack of supply. Whatever the reason is, we're seeing some slowdown. But the slowdown is not going to be everywhere. You see that Orange County actually continued to improve. We see a little bit of inch up in Riverside. Um, but in Ventura, San Diego, and San Bernardino, we're seeing some slowdown also. So it varies. Um, here's the percent change that we're seeing in for the 7 counties. Orange County, Riverside, as I mentioned, continue to improve, but some of the other counties are actually dipping. Um, Again, it could be just a blip, but I tend to incline that it might actually slow down. Um, we might see a little bit more slowdown from this point on, partly because of the coronavirus, but also because the housing market could be coming to the end of the buying season. Now, we're hoping that it will actually prolong a little bit since we lost a couple months, but there's a chance that we might actually see the end of the home buying season. But we will see, with more weekly number in the coming weeks. In terms of pending sales, we're also seeing some slowdown in pending sales. Again, these legends may not necessarily be reflect the actual week. This week, the week for the last bar for every single set of data should be June 29th, which is the latest week that we have. But if you take a look at those numbers, it seems to decline a little bit, for every single month. So we could be seeing some leveling off in pending sales, which will reflect, closed sales in July. So we probably will see a little bit of a slowdown in July. June probably will hold tight, for most of the Southern California counties, but July might be slowing down a little bit. Now, the lending environment continued to do well, though. That's one of the reasons why, we are hopeful that we might see a little bit more demand. If you look at the mortgage rates, many of you know mortgage rates, the average 30-year fixed rate right now is at around 3% or 3.15%. That really helps people to on their mortgage payment. A drop in now 3% right now as compared to last year, that's an 80 basis point difference. So when you take into account the drop in 80 basis point and mortgage rates, plus we have a 3.7% discount in price on the statewide median price, this gives the home buyers, potential home buyers, some hope that they will save some mortgage payment. With the drop in price as well as the drop in mortgage payment, they could have potentially saved 13 or 14% in terms of mortgage payment. For now, that number that I showed you earlier, that's a statewide number. So let's take a look at the individual regional level. For LA metropolitan areas, which include all the counties except for San Diego, the mortgage payment also dipped, by about 9.7 or 10%. So this is encouraging because if you were to buy, for a home buyer to buy a home that is similar to a home that they could buy last year, because of drop in price and because of drop in rates, they could potentially save, close to 10%. So this is a good time to buy right now. Now, as far as price is concerned, take a look at the statewide median price. It dropped 3.7% as compared to last year. Now, the drop is probably partly due to a mix of sales change. I may not have mentioned earlier, but the luxury housing market in April and May and March were a little bit weaker in terms of sales compared to the more affordable market, and as such, that actually changed the mix of sales in favor of more affordable housing, and that actually could change the median price a little bit. And as such, we're seeing a little dip of home prices in May. In June, when we take a look at the pending sales number, it seems like they're virtually flat. So it is possible that in June and July we may actually see home prices actually a little bit more, actually continue, maybe dip a little bit, but not so much, compared to, what we saw in May. But it could also be pretty flat compared to last year. Now, it also has to do, of course, with mix of sales. We're not going to talk about mix of sales right now, but let's take a look at, the price growth in individual price segments. Here we have it separated out by percentile. The the lowest percentile represents somewhere the price range somewhere between 0 to 300 or so, and then from 20 to 40th percentile, something about 300. That represents a price range of maybe 300 to 500, and so on and so forth. So you can see, for the lowest price percentile, it's continued to increase by a very, very small amount, by 0.4%, but all the other price segments continue to dip by ranging from 0.3% to 3.3%. So we're seeing some softening in price in every price segment, but the tight supply, though, will probably help, price from dropping too fast. Remember, in the recessions 12 years ago or 10 years ago, home prices actually plummeted, by at one point dropped more than 50%. We're not going to see that because active listings remain very, very tight. In fact, it dropped by, at a state level, it dropped by about 34%. And it consistently been below last year's level by 25 or 30%. So with active listings remaining tight, we're going to see some support in price. If you look at it by an individual region, take a look at Southern California. Compared to last year, we also dropped quite significantly in May. The Southern California level dropped from close to 29,000 active listings to only about 18,000. That's a significant drop of 39%. It's actually the biggest drop in all the regions. Compared to San Francisco, it only dropped 28, and I said quote unquote only. So this is a significant drop, and it probably will not improve for quite some time. If you look at the weekly number, again, I have the legend wrong here, so I apologize. If you look at the latest week, which is June, again, end of June's number, we are seeing LA, for example, continue to trend down for 2 weeks in a row. Same for Orange County. Riverside bounced back, but then it's actually as the lowest level for the last 4 weeks or so. In general, we're seeing some slowdown in new listings. So that's going to continue to tighten up the active supply, and that will provide some support to prices. But of course, it also will hurt sales. As of now, if you look at some of the other indicators, it seems to gives us some encouraging news. As far as showings are concerned, we're seeing showing activities continue to improve. This is a chart shared by showingtime.com. Let me explain a little bit. The orange line here shows the weekly average of 2020 as compared to the beginning of the year, the first week of the year. In March, it dipped below last year's earlier part of the year's level by about 60-70%. But then from that point on, it started soaring. In fact, the latest week, we actually have the weekly average above the early part of the year by about over 100%. If you compare to last year, same time of last year, we're above last year by 55%. That's very encouraging because earlier part of the year, we were below, and now we're catching up. Purchase applications also have been improved. This is another indicator that actually gives you an idea of how we're doing compared to last year. Compared to last year, the purchase applications, of course, at the beginning of the in March and in April, were down quite significantly, but then in the last few weeks, we started improving. We were improving by double digit, increasing on a double digit basis for the last few weeks. So what's going to happen? What's going to look like, in the upcoming weeks? Well, let's take a look. First, the economy, then the housing market. Now, economy-wise, if you look at the GDP, as I mentioned, the second quarter is probably going to be a big dip. Many economists, Bank of America, JP Morgan, UCLA, they all predicted that the second quarter is going to drop by 30 to 40%. The latest statistics by UCLA, or latest forecast by UCLA, even think that it's going to drop more than 40%. Third quarter, fourth quarter will be a little bit better. But even with the increased improvement in third and fourth quarter, 2020 is going to be a decline, compared to 2019. Most likely, it will be somewhere between 5 to 10%. What about the housing market? For the state, we saw a sharp decline in March and in April and in May, but the bounce back is going to happen in June. It's going to continue to recover in July, but most likely for the rest of the year, we'll see on a year-over-year basis below last year's level. If that is the case, then we will probably end up with about a 12 to 13% decline compared to last year. Price-wise, as I mentioned, tight supply will probably provide some support at home prices. Still, we are going to see some softening in the next couple months or so. And the number that I have here is probably a little bit more conservative. In reality, it may actually turn out to be a little bit better, but for the rest of the year, we may see a 3 or 4%, maybe even 5% decline. And so for the year as a whole, for 2020, we will end up having maybe about a 1 to 2% decline. So let me wrap it up. For the economy, I think we will see a bounce back. It's continue to bounce back, but the recovery is going to be slow. Part of the reason why we're seeing slow recovery is because of the uncertainty about the coronavirus. The coronavirus continue to be a concern, and will continue to be a concern for quite some time, at least for the next few months or so, especially since we start seeing some resurgence in the virus infection. In the housing market, though, we expect a bounce back in June, July. It will continue to be below last year's level. But thanks to low interest rates, I think we'll be recovering, and we might have seen the bottom already, so we'll continue to recover. Supply, though, is going to be very, very tight. I think a lot of homeowners may not be comfortable in putting out their house on the market. As such, remain tight, and some of the new constructions probably will not happen because of the shutdown. That will help price, to stay afloat a little bit, even though it's going to soften for the remaining part of the year. But it's going to hold up a little bit better compared to what we anticipated before. After all, housing market is still doing better compared to the economy as a whole, and I think it's going to be a bright spot, after the crisis. So with that said, thank you for tuning in, and we will have more updated data in a few weeks, and at that time we'll report back. Thank you very much, and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.